Hello and welcome back to Supercar Secrets, brought to you by supercarsmonaco.com. Today we're going to have a look at a buyer's guide for one of the most beautiful and iconic Ferraris of them all, the Dino. And here to talk us through is our resident expert on classic cars, Iain Tyrrell. Iain, what a beautiful car. Tell me a little bit about the design and the history of the Dino range.
Well, as you've said, it's one of the most iconic models. It started out as a styling exercise. It started out as an engine actually, because Dino was short for Alfred Dino, who was Enzo Ferrari's son, and the engine was a V6 that was used developed by him for Formula 2. It was his brainchild, and Enzo Ferrari wanted to honor the memory of his son because he was very, very traumatized by his son's death. He took it very badly. So he started a model of car, a new lineup of car. He commissioned Pininfarina to design a very slippery mid-engined body shape called the Dino. And Aldo Brovarone at Pininfarina, the stylist, came up with a prototype. They went through that stage a couple of times, and then they came up with the Dino production car, the 206 as it was called. And actually they didn't realize it, but it was pioneering on a grand scale, because it was the first mid-engined Ferrari production car. And of course, over 50% of Ferrari's sales since have been mid-engine cars. So huge step change for Ferrari, really.
And very different to the Daytona that was a kind of around at the same time, a great big front engine Grand Tourer. This is such a nimble mid-engine car in comparison. Absolutely,
absolutely. And exactly right. I mean, Ferrari's sort of stereotypical car at that time was a big, beefy front engine, rear wheel drive V12, front engine and gearbox, maybe a transaxle at the back, but very much a sort of classical formula. And in fact, Enzo Ferrari, when they first launched the Dino, was so nervous about it not being accepted that he created the Dino brand. So when the Dinos, all through their production, they didn't have a Ferrari badge on them. And in fact, people blanched at that so much that Maranello concessionaires, the UK importers, to use this example, actually bought a load of Ferrari badges and stuck them on Dinos, so that when people were paying their £4,500 or thereabouts, they actually knew they were buying a Ferrari and not a Dino. And the original sales brochure for Dinos, the wording actually said, "Tiny, brilliant, safe, almost a Ferrari."
Wow. That's an interesting branding exercise that a lot of people would shudder at today.
Yeah, he was hedging his bets. If it was a failure, he was protecting his core V12 brand. But of course, history has been, the Dino carved out a whole niche of its own. And as I say, that and its successors have been responsible for over half Ferrari production since. Staggering statistic, really.
Yeah, and then I think after a few years, it got an upgrade and a bigger engine, and some other bits and pieces were added to enhance the model further.
That's right. The first series, the 2 litre, they were quite close to their racing heritage. They had a sort of cast alloy block, and then when they productionized it later, to give it a bit more torque as well, they upped the cc by 400 cc to 2.4 litre. And they sort of productionized the block by making it cast iron and more in line with Fiat's other foundry products, really, and Ferrari's in a way.
Because I suppose this was the period when Fiat got heavily involved with the company. So did that lead to changes in the way Ferrari went about producing and marketing the Dino?
Well, yes. In fact, the Dino was pivotal. The Fiat Dino and the Ferrari Dino were pivotal in cementing the relationship between Enzo Ferrari and Giovanni Agnelli, the head of Fiat at the time. and they were sort of liking the look of each other, seeing how, you know, treading carefully with the first Dino project, the Fiat Dino, to homologate the engine so that Ferrari could use it in Formula 2. And it was a huge stepping stone for both of them, because the Dino was the car that cemented Fiat and Ferrari's relationship, which survives to this day, of course. Fiat own Ferrari now.
So what are we talking about in terms of production numbers of the Dino across its life cycle?
The three models, essentially, 206 GT, 246 GT, and 246 GTS, under 4,000, round about 3,700 in total.
Okay. And is there any kind of variance in the desirability of those models? Is it based on age, or is it more based on the later ones being thought of as better because they've got the bigger engine and so on? What's the kind of collector's view of the different models in the range?
Well, the most collectible of the three is the ultra rare 206 GT. It had the alloy block engine, which was lighter. It had alloy bodywork, which is considered lighter as well. And they were the sort of first pure Dino, very much within the original vision. Then we had the 246 GT, which was a more production-ready car, steel body, cast iron block. So the 206 was the most desirable. 246 GT, not so desirable, but then the Targa top model came, and this is where things really got interesting, because the 246 GTS, the Targa top one, like this car here, was the first open top mid-engine Ferrari production car. And that was when, you know, the Magnum Ferrari, we remember the 308 GTS, for example, that became the sort of the halo model, the 246 GTS. So 206 is the most valuable. The Targa top one, very rare actually, very low production numbers. Some people don't prefer the window at the back here. They're not so keen on this styling feature here, that the GT has a sort of little quarter window here, which people generally consider prettier, but the GTS is, you know, it's got the open top motoring, so it's considered desirable for that reason.
But this one also has the what I think are called the Chairs and Flairs features. Tell us about that.
So towards the end of production, what Ferrari offered as a couple of options, they brought out the Daytona, and Pininfarina had come up with a really fabulous design for the seats in the Daytona, with a sort of ribbed, almost like a rib cage on the seat, for want of a better way of putting it, a skeleton effect, but it looked amazing. This car's got it. So we've got these are the Daytona seats. So that's the chairs bit, and this was a factory optional extra at the time, to replace the sort of standard plain. It was either like for want of a better way of putting it, a toweling material that they had on them new, and as an option you could have either vinyl or leather, and then a super rare other option on the car was these 7.5 inch wide Campagnolo wheels, which are embossed here with Dino, and they were, because they were wider, I mean, really 7.5 inch wide wheels in the 1970s early 70s was quite wide. What Ferrari had to do was, instead of a sort of standard little wheel arch here, they had to flare the wheel arches out quite drastically to keep it legal, so that it wasn't spraying up beyond the bodywork. Hence the expression Chairs and Flairs.
And just give us an idea of how rare these cars are, Iain.
Well, in right-hand drive form, they were quite popular in America. By popular, I mean probably over 100. But in the UK, they made 15 of the GTs, in other words, the non-Targa top cars. And right-hand drive, they made, you ready for this? 7.
Wow. So that is one of the 7 you've got there in your workshop.
This is number 4 of the 7, yes.
Wow. So what does all this translate to in terms of values across the range from the 206 right the way through to this one?
Right. The 206 is a £500,000 plus car if it's in the right condition with the right provenance. 246 GTs, a nice one in pounds. Generally, they made 448 right-hand drive, if I'm not mistaken, round about £250,000. A normal GTS without the chairs and flares, round about £350,000. It doesn't affect the value of the normal GTS too much if they've been converted to chairs and or flares, because you could have either or instead of just both. But the fact that it's got this combination, it was ordered from you with the Daytona seats and the flares, you're uplifting 20% above, a good 20% above the price of a 246 GTS, just for this option.
Okay, wow. And so let's assume I'm in the market to buy a car like this. What are some of the things I should be looking out for? What are the things that might cost me a lot of money if I'm not careful in the particular model that I acquire?
Well, the big thing with Dinos is bodywork. 1970s car, there was hardly any rust proofing on them. Even as young as 2 years old, they were rusting quite badly on the UK's climate and the UK's roads. And it's pretty much the same around the world. Rust-free Dinos were, non-existent, really. So the important thing, without a shadow of a doubt, is the bodywork. It has to have been correctly restored, preferably with a photographic record to show the work that's been done. And things have got to be absolutely accurate. So, I mean, you look at this panel gap here, it's beautifully parallel all the way across. And this car is finished in black, which is its original factory color. And of course, black shows up every imperfection. But you can see the panel work on this car is utterly superb. It's beautifully flat here. This line is nice and crisp along the bottom. This panel here has been done properly. Quite often you can tell if a Dino has been substandard restored because the bodywork isn't 100% on it. And really these days, the market won't tolerate anything less than 100%. It's got to be like that.
And this one has actually been through a really detailed restoration process, has it?
It has. It's by one of the sort of name restoration specialists in the UK. So there's a record of every bit of work that was done to the car. Yeah.
So as a sort of cautionary tale, if I was to buy one that had a poor restoration done, and then I was to give it to one of these top firms to get into the sort of condition of this car, what kind of bill might I be looking at?
Well, to restore one of these cars properly, we actually restored another car for a customer, another GTS, which had been in a museum, for 30 years and was in a really, really bad state. We did everything to that car, and I think it ended up at about 1,500 man-hours of work, plus all the materials. So they're not a cheap car to do properly. You're talking north of a couple of £100,000 plus VAT to do a proper job.
Okay, that's pretty significant. And what about the mechanical side of the Dino? Anything I should look out for there?
The engine needs to be quiet. It needs to be, if it's clattering and making all sorts of horrible noises, big alarm signs, really. Again, you want to see history of it being looked after. In period, the camshafts on the engine, they had sort of quite wild cams, as people would say in everyday parlance. Big valve lift, big cam lobes. They tended to wear out quite significantly. But these days, it's a different world. People keep on top of these things. They don't just drive Dinos into the ground as an everyday mode of transport. But it needs to have been, again, properly prepared and serviced and adjusted and set up by a specialist, really. And you want to see documentary evidence of that. Yeah.
Okay, documentary evidence. So, well, that's a fascinating tour of a very interesting car, and obviously you've got one of the rarest ones there. So, if anyone is interested, at the time we are filming this, the Dino is available. So if you contact us through the supercarsmonaco.com site, we can start a conversation with Iain about it. But obviously, I guess cars like this are so rare that they probably don't hang around for too long when you do get hold of them, Iain.
Well, when you get to this level, I mean, this is the sort of car that will go into a serious collection. Somebody who buys this car could possibly have other Ferraris already. Maybe not, but maybe so. And I know that at least 4 of the other cars are buried deeply in collections and will never really come to market anytime soon. So that makes this, you know, a very interesting car, really.
So it's really more like a 1 in 3 chance of having one like this available there.
Precisely, yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing the Dino story with us, Iain, and join us again for another Supercar Secrets very soon.